Listen to Disney's Four Scores, a new podcast featuring composers like Randy Newman, Kristen Anderson Lopez, and Robert Lopez, and Christoph Beck as they talk about creating music for Frozen 2, the Toy Story films, Ant-Man, and many more. Subscribe to Four Scores today.
The Oracl3 Network. Look deeper.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 1692 means we got shots fired. 4:15 a.m. Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Their dreams of becoming American citizens ended today in a blaze of gunfire. A gunman went on a rampage, opening fire on immigrants taking the citizenship test in upstate New York in the city of Binghamton. The police there say he killed 13 people and wounded 4 others who are reported to be in critical condition. And then apparently he took his own life, all in just a matter of minutes.
Many shootings that we have covered on this podcast have occurred in places of learning, and today's is no exception. Although it is not the typical school most people would think about. The American Civic Association, also known as the American Civic Center, is located in Binghamton, New York. It is a place of learning, but additionally, the center offers various resources and social services for immigrants and refugees. However, on the cold and rainy morning of April 3rd, 2009, it became the site of one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, despite it being one of the most unheard of. There were as many victims in the Binghamton shooting as the Columbine shooting, yet if you were to ask most people, they would probably tell you they've never heard of it. Perhaps because all of the victims were immigrants searching for their own American dream, or perhaps because the United States has become the unofficial home of mass shooting events, which have become a part of our everyday life. Regardless of the reason, 13 innocent people lost their lives, and an additional 4 people were injured horrifically and terrifyingly. Their stories deserve as much honor and attention as any of the others who have been so senselessly taken in mass murder events, those of which have been normalized as a part of our modern society. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. In today's episode, we will be referring to the shooter as Ryan. April 3rd, 2009 started as a typical early spring morning in south-central New York. Binghamton is the home of the American Civic Association Immigration Center, which sits at 131 Front Street. The center was busy and bustling as usual, with people coming and going, attending classes, and obtaining services. The day wasn't typical for Ryan, however. This was the day he was going to carry out his terrible plan, and commit one of the worst mass murders our nation has ever seen. This was no random attack either. No. This was a cold and calculated attack that Ryan had been planning for at least several weeks beforehand. You see, on March 18th, 2009, Ryan wrote a letter, which was addressed to a local news station, describing the harassment that he had been experiencing by police. While the letter was dated March 18th, it wasn't actually sent until the day of the shooting. News Station 10, out of Syracuse, New York, received the package from Ryan several days later. It contained his 2-page handwritten letter, along with his driver's license, a gun permit, and several photos depicting Ryan smiling while holding a gun. The 2 handguns that were located at the shooting scene matched up to the serial numbers on Ryan's pistol permit. On the morning of the shooting, Ryan borrowed a 1993 green Toyota Camry that was registered to his father and drove to the Civic Center, entering at the rear of the building. He drove up to the exit and parked the car directly in front of the door, thereby preventing anyone from coming out of the back door of the building. He wanted to trap everyone inside.
It obviously was premeditated. He barricaded the back door so nobody could get out, put his car right against the door. He was making sure nobody could escape.
For unknown reasons, he locked his car door when he exited, leaving his backpack and a laser sight for the firearm visible to anyone that happened by. Both were eventually discovered by police. It was reported later that Ryan was an Asian male who was about 6 feet tall, with a slight, thin build. He wore a bright green coat, blue jeans, and dark-rimmed glasses. His appearance was totally average and nondescript, except for the fact that he also wore a large body armor vest. After leaving the car at the back side of the building, Ryan walked to the front and entered the building by way of the main entrance. The moment he entered the center, Ryan raised his gun and shot both of the receptionists, killing one instantly by a gunshot wound to the head. The second receptionist was shot in the stomach, but amazingly, she had the foresight to fall to the ground, faking her own death. She then crawled under her desk, calling 911.
Shot wound to the abdomen under a desk on the first floor, and the subject laying on the ground in front of the reception area.
This hero was Shirley DeLuca, and she managed to stay on the phone with the 911 dispatcher for 39 excruciatingly long minutes, until she was finally rescued. Because she was able to remain on that call, crucial information was able to be passed to first responders. Unfortunately, the one thing that poor Shirley didn't know, and couldn't pass along to the police, was whether this madman that just shot her was acting alone or in concert.
The gentleman came in. She got up to ask him if she could help him, and he just didn't say anything, I guess, and got his gun and shot her, and she remembers falling backwards and down.
Ryan proceeded through the building. Wordlessly, his silence and calm demeanor were eerie. Immediately off the reception area was a classroom, which happened to be full that day, with an ESL, or English as a Second Language class. In fact, this was the very classroom where Ryan himself had previously taken ESL classes. There were 16 people inside the room, and 14, including the professor, were shot. To manage to hit that many people that quickly means Ryan basically walked in the door and began spraying bullets every which way. The chaos and mayhem must have been absolutely overwhelming.
Very quickly, 5 bangs, bang, 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 again, and everyone looked at each other and we just ran.
Police arrived on the scene within minutes of the first 911 call from Shirley. When Ryan heard the police sirens, he put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger, ending the horrific massacre after a mere 3 minutes. 3 minutes that probably felt like 3 years, or 3 lifetimes to each of the shooting victims and other witnesses.
He must have been a coward. Where we speculate when he heard the sirens that he decided on his own life. So that's what he was, heavily armed, had a lot of ammunition on him, and thank God before more lives were lost that he decided to do that.
The destruction Ryan created and left behind is excessive. In those 3 short minutes, he managed to rip off 99 shots, 11 from a .45 caliber Beretta, and another 88 from a 9mm Beretta. The nearby Binghamton High School went on lockdown for fear that this was a multifaceted attack, and all of the nearby learning centers may be under siege. While it is a blessing that this much destruction was limited to one scene, the decimation of human life is so immense that there is little else to be grateful for.
I've been kind of keeping an eye, but I wanted to stay away from the window as much as I could, so every once in a while I just kind of peeked, because with all those rifles around, I thought I don't need to be collateral damage here. And it was pretty much isolated in front of the building. They stood to the right and to the left of the building. The SWAT teams kind of stood behind the trees with their rifles. They put a ladder on my building up to the roof. We have a flat roof, I guess, for the SWAT team. And then it just, I saw them bring out a gurney with someone on it, a man, and that's the only one I saw. Probably about a half an hour, 45 minutes ago, I looked out, and a lot of the hostages, or whatever they are, were coming out of the front of the building, and they were being checked by the police, and then they took them somewhere else. And no, they looked fine. They looked like, and actually from what I'm understanding, and it may or may not be true, is that they had shut themselves in a closet, that they had gone in the basement and shut themselves in a closet. So evidently, I think what I'm most concerned about is that the shooter is still loose somewhere, and he's supposed to have a high-powered rifle. So that kind of worries me quite a bit, that he's possibly running around, because according to looking out the window and all, the police are coming in and out of the building and what have you, so I can't think somebody's still in there hiding. We have very little crime in this area, and I think it has to be somebody's berserk, because obviously he planned it. He blocked the back door, according to the news, with his car so no one could escape. But if he's loose, that worries me. I did go lie down and make sure all my doors were locked, however, but just in case the guy is on the loose. Just the hostages.
Just the
They made them put their hands on their heads, because of course they weren't sure who they were.
After their arrival, the police waited outside of the building for the SWAT team to confirm there was no longer a threat. Later reports suggested that perhaps the law enforcement didn't enter quickly enough. Some people thought they waited too long to go inside. Whether this is right or wrong, the police didn't enter the building for approximately 43 minutes. When they finally proceeded in, despite the delay in entering the center, no one was shot after the police arrived on scene, or before the SWAT team entered.
The SWAT team started to move in. They moved in. All of a sudden, the first thing you see is a civilian come out and a ball in a couple people's arms. He was being carried out and rushed immediately to an ambulance. SWAT team backed out. SWAT team backs in again. They bring out another body.
Because they didn't hear any gunfire after they got there, the responding officers no longer believed there was a, quote, active shooter, so they called for the SWAT team and waited for them to show up. The SWAT team arrived and entered the center at about 11:14 a.m., which was nearly 43 minutes after the initial 911 call. The chief of police later stated that if there were actually an active shooter in progress when they arrived, they would have entered the building straight away.
After they made their entry and declared to me that particular area, not the whole building, was safe for me to enter, I did look at it. It was heartbreaking. It was very chaotic, as District Attorney Mallon also sometime after that looked, and he said he just wanted to cry. That he's been in law enforcement a number of years, seen a lot of horrific things in his time, and nothing ever like that.
Police found countless spent and unspent magazine shells all around the scene. It was reported that multiple 911 calls about the shooting were placed. Several came from callers that spoke broken English. After all, many people were there trying to learn English as their second language. However, this made some of the calls difficult to transmit, as determining what happened from the caller wasn't easy for most dispatchers. At approximately noon, almost an hour and a half after this terrible ordeal began, SWAT officers started to escort people from the building. Terrified survivors were hidden anywhere they could find a safe place, including the boiler room in the basement. Some of the people hiding down there waited several hours before they were found and helped out to safety.